So, welcome to this societal chat, and thank you for joining us today. We are looking forward to a great evening with another great persona that we bring to the discussion today. And it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Mala. So Mala Subramaniam is our guest of the evening. She is the CEO of Arghyam, and shortly she will share more about Arghyam. So I don't want to take anything away from that, but essentially a lot of her focus is on sustainable participatory water security. She is an accomplished professional, 2 decades of strategy and execution experience in multiple sectors: banking, education, agrotech, IT, ES, and not-for-profit. She's also been grooming, developing, mentoring large government and NGO programs, catalyzing ecosystem actors, and leveraging an open public digital infrastructure. That is what brings us together, which is our joint passion about spinning up large-scale ecosystems on a shared digital backbone or a shared digital infrastructure. Of course, her background: she is a graduate from Indian School of Institute of Management, Calcutta, and is a certified executive and business coach. But I think this is all potentially just to set the background, but the real fun is interacting with her. So I would, without further ado, welcome Mala. Welcome to this great conversation today evening. And we are so happy to have you with us. So let us get started. And I think the great place to start would be to learn more about Arghyam. So some fun facts, some important dimensions of Arghyam. So would request you to take a few minutes and tell us more. Why is Arghyam so exciting? What have you been up to?
Yeah. No, so I think Arghyam has always been exciting, right? I think ever since it was born, I think it had this strange DNA, right? I would call it a very schizophrenic DNA, very small wants to be very big, on a given day wants to scale, on another day wants to be really micro and do some things on the ground. So I think in that sense, it has somehow very positively carried a lot of angst. And in that angst has given birth to a lot of, I would say, innovation in the sector. And I think we continue that journey. So Arghyam is 15 years old, and it really started off in a way that said, let's look at what's available in water, fund people in water, and understand this whole, what are the dimensions in water. And that was about 2 to 3 years. Through that process, the complexity of water was sort of apparent. And so the second phase was really about, can we invest in projects and get an understanding of end to end, how do we take a problem and sort of solve it? And that sort of included working with communities, looking at issues which are more first file. So, and then building out physical interventions, because finally water security is about creating more storage, more safe storage, closer to home. So that was what the second phase was about, to look at projects end to end, the soft spend of working with communities, mobilizing communities, but also to build out the interventions. And that's when sort of got into a little bit of analytics on, how do we spend Arghyam's money better? How do we leverage what's already there in the ecosystem? And so the third phase was being much more systematic and structured in looking at programmatic investments, looking at what are the gaps in the sector, and so sort of honing in on groundwater, which we felt was completely underinvested, invisible resource. And India was water secure in 1950 and food insecure, but now we find ourselves water insecure and food secure, largely due to sort of digging and sort of looking for groundwater deeper and deeper, which we know is now unsustainable. So the third phase was about looking at groundwater issues in the country, hydrogeology typologies, and the interconnection with how communities interact with that scarce resource, and what are the issues, quantity issues, quality issues, access issues, And then how do we build out approaches that can build water security for the communities through groundwater conservation. And that sort of led rise to many very interesting things. And for a small organization like Arghyam, the partner network, and Arghyam is a funding organization, so a large network of NGOs who were working in this that Arghyam partnered with were together able to influence a lot of impact on policy, to make groundwater visible in policy, to attach public funds to groundwater, to understand that springs are actually groundwater in the mountains. So we need to look at that specifically because they have some attributes that are different, to look at quality issues, not just bacteriological, which was understood, but chemical issues, contamination issues like arsenic and fluoride. So a lot of interesting developments in terms of creating an understanding, creating impact on policy, and also sort of reallocating or allocating government public funds to issues in groundwater. And so that was really the first 3 phases. And through that, we sort of felt that there were operating models, there were great NGOs doing fantastic work on the ground. But when we sort of totted them all up, and it was a great seminal moment about 4 or 5 years ago, when we sat together with all the partners and said, now all of this work and all of the other work that others, similar partners are doing who are not funded by Arghyam, if we added them all up and sort of take the same approach to the problem on the ground, how long do you think we will take to solve the problem? And the number came to like 30,000 years. And that was really, that was a telling moment. And so we had to, sit back and say, okay, so here we are. So what do we do? And that's when I think we all kind of felt that we didn't have to say it. We just felt like the problem is, is really calling out to us to see how can we get much, much faster in reaching the people who need this help. And so that was the turning point in terms of looking at a very different order of scale. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, that's fascinating. 30,000 years. Wow. That would be many, many lifetimes, if you will. And I guess around that time or a little later, probably you would have intersected with this idea of platform thinking and societal platforms and saying, what are these guys talking about? What is this strange vocabulary? So how was your early experience with the idea? What all went on within your mind as a leader and within Arghyam? Share some of that with us.
Yeah, I think this continued, the Jekyll and Hyde continued, right? So, it was some more sort of dimensions on both sides were added. So really, actually, I think some sort of precursors to the intersect with the platform thinking was when we started looking at, the whole model was let's demonstrate some approach, some operating models, and then sort of impact policy, and then hope that the government would scale, what we're saying. But when we realized that the current operating models are not amenable for the government to scale, right? They were very, very resource intensive, and they were not really something that the government could take and sort of just put it out there and toss it over for others to pick up. And that's when we realized that we have to get involved in execution at scale, right? And scale meant the language of scale was not understood in the same way, right? I mean, today we are talking of population scale, the near population scale, without trepidation. But at that time, scale meant, 10 to 20 to 30 to 40, and that's really was the order. So we felt that is the order that we'll have to break, right? We'll have to get non-linear. And I think this intersect with the societal platform, that's the thing that struck us. Is there a way that can actually, amplify impact non-linearly? And I would say that, the early days of that interaction was exhilarating, especially for me, because I'm not a techie. And, so really, I frankly had nothing to lose. Right. And it helped that I was actually getting all this wisdom and knowledge and intelligence from probably the best in the world, perhaps. And every time I came away from an interaction with the team, I was like, wow, I mean, this is possible, right? It was highly energizing. It also gave me a chance to sit down and say, how does this translate to some things that we're seeing on the ground, and sort of hang on to some nuggets, right? For instance, the thing of, what is the GPS of water, right? Is there a GPS of water? Initially, it was, yeah, we find that, we're going to solve this problem. But, and then there's this excitement over, let's look for the GPS of water. And then, there's a lot of discussion and analyzing the issues in water, and then realizing that, there is no GPS of water as of now, and does that mean that, and then you feel disappointed. Can we do this? Is this something that, what are we taking on? And do we become a technology company? Do we have to change our DNA? What sort of, what will that take, right? And what will that make us, and will we be successful? So really, I would say, a mix of excitement at the possibilities, but also, how exactly do we do that? What is required for us to go from here to there? I mean, we could see the end, I think, but we didn't know the steps in between, and that can be, it can be a lonely place, because you're kind of wondering, what do we have to do today? I can see what will happen 5 years from now, but what needs to happen now, right? So that was difficult. And I think what helped was to sort of every day say, okay, forget that 5-year picture. Let's look at the +1 kind of change that we can make, the +1 understanding that we can build. And I think there, the aha moment for us was to even define our mission, right? So what the words that we use, we spent a lot of time to figure out what words go into our mission, right? So I think that helped a lot in terms of providing clarity. Okay, so this is what it is. This is our mission. And within the mission, what are the problems worth solving? So really to sit down and say, exactly what will we do? Because there are many issues. What do we pick up? And then within that to say, there's a life cycle of water, sort of intervention. Where do we kind of start, right? So do we look at training, capacity building, or do we look at activities post that? Or do we look at M&E? Do we look at data for data's sake, or data that is actually placed in a program? So all of that, I think just that the process, then a lot of homework that we did, a lot of prep, talked to millions of people, I think. And almost every day we recalibrated, where are we, what are we doing? Is this the right thing to do? We changed our mission language almost, I think, 3 to 4 times in 6 months. And then finally, we felt like this is something we can live with. And so we finally landed on saying, we will enable the ecosystem. We will not do anything ourselves, but we will enable and catalyze and strengthen the capacity of the ecosystem actors to impact water security for 100 million people. And I think that sort of that separation of us from ecosystem actors doing and enabling, that gave us a lot of strength in terms of this clarity we can work with.
Amazing. In a minute, we will take a few remarks and questions from our audience. But meanwhile, what was going on in your mind personally as a leader, going through this ambiguity and unpacking, and what was going on with yourself?
Yeah, I think it was, so for me personally, I felt like it's not an option. Like, we have to go through this, right? Because business as usual, we had determined would not be an option.
30,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was something that all of us, I think some of us said it loud with greater conviction than others maybe. But I think all of us felt that this is not an option, right? So I think that's really what kept us going. We don't have an option. So if not this, it's something else. So we'll have to find that something else. And so it was a question of, if not now, then when? If not us, then who? All of that, right? So fed in, because we saw the ecosystem for what it is, and it's not easy to make this kind of change. It's not easy to find patient capital that would be required for this. It's not easy to find an organizational sort of framework that would be amenable for this. And we felt that we are the most suited. However difficult it is, we may have to take the lead on this.
Fascinating. That's so I think, Mala, I can imagine you standing at this crossroads, right? Saying, okay, now we have figured out that we are in an uncomfortable place. We have recast our mission, and now we have to make choices to build or to get something built. And from there, you reach this place called For Water, which is your platform play. Tell us something about what happened in that journey. How did you make decisions at those crossroads?
Yeah, that was quite a lot of twists and turns, right? So because we decided, okay, we understood platforms. I think the way we kind of conceptualized it, that is that there were a lot of cars, but who's building the road? That made sense to us, because we felt like everyone had solutions. It's not like the system, 70 years of work in the sector, it's not like we don't have solutions, right? But why are they not traveling, right? Why are they not going from here to there? I mean, the next village is not picking it up, or the experts are not able to go where they are required, or the content has to be redone again and again. Programs find it very difficult to take off, right? So 1 or 2 years into the program and they're still figuring out, what should we do? Where are the experts? What is the content? What is the curriculum, etc.? So we felt, so how do we build a road on which these cars can travel? So that part we got, right? In terms of an analogy. But then we were it was very difficult for us to get from there to then say, what is this thing, right? What is this road? What does it look like? Does it have to have a beginning and an end that's very, very clear right away? How much of technology do we sort of ab initio bite on, and do we have to build all of that technology? We kind of understood this language of builder, extender, and participant theoretically, but then so we were not really sure what that meant in water, right? If Arghyam is a builder, then who is an extender? Can we find enough people to build, enough people to extend? Arghyam can't be the only sort of organization. Then we started dabbling a little bit in sort of working with an existing software. For instance, the Sunbird, we took that and said, let's start learning what this is. Because we were in the business of capacity building, and LMS was what it was doing, which is the learning management system. And then we sort of understood a lot of things which we did not anticipate, right? In terms of, there's not just the building aspect, there's also the servicing aspect, right? So it's not just, we can't just write the code, put it in an open sort of fora, and then expect that people will run with it, right? There has to be an operating model for it. That part had not struck us before we kind of got into this, right? We also figured that, open is really not open in that sense, right? Free is not free. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to make it usable, and that costs money, right? And so what is the ecosystem's capacity to take that and run? Who's going to fund that, and who's going to have the capacity to do that as well, etc., etc. So I think that the phase was very difficult, in that we said, first we said we'll build, or we'll take something and extend, and in some sense become a sort of core builder extender. Then we said, no, that might not work for us, because that's really going to change the DNA of Arghyam. And we're not really sure we can do that very successfully. So maybe we should, leave it to the ecosystem to extend, right? We take what is there and allow and fund and support the ecosystem participants to come and sort of solicit some of them and say, sort of make them builders. So find NGOs that are already doing strong in tech, and then work with them and see if they can become builder extenders. That also we felt is not going to work, because the water ecosystem is really, really very nascent, right? And the ability and the tech ability, the tech, what exists, in terms of a spectrum, in terms of technology in this is very nascent. So we said, this also, we were not really sure how's this going to take off, and how long are we going to wait to get this clarity and get people with whom we can actually do this extension. So that's when we realized, I think it's better that we leverage what is already available. And even if we start, let's just, this +1 thing really worked for us, right? So we said, what is the one big problem that we want to solve today, right? And the one big problem we realized was going to be foundational, and nothing else we did would matter, is that when you're talking training, you really have to make the people who are being trained available so that they can move on a cycle rather than keep going back to, square one of the training, right? Both from a training perspective, trainer perspective, program perspective, and a trainee perspective. So from all that sort of angles, we felt what is happening now is completely inefficient, right? So if we can even just solve that problem and make these people visible, the trainers, the trainees visible, and along with that, the content, then I think we would have created a foundation for solving some of the higher order problems later. So I think when we got to that clarity and then sort of then worked with a partner who was then able to turn that whole idea, we co-created the idea with the partner and then turn that to sort of, so Sean was able to turn that to a product and then sort of offer this as a service. That's when we realized maybe this is where we sort of get into the game, right? So this is what we start with. This in itself, if we did just this, it's probably going to be a game-changing thing for the sector. And that was also very liberating, right? So we don't have to boil the ocean. We just do this. And it also spoke to a lot of people we spoke to at that time, right? So they were able to see, where are the people? We kept training them. We don't know who they are, where they are, etc. So I think that was the turning point, finding the plus one, realizing that plus one is very simple, sometimes very disappointingly so. But then we felt, but we felt that's probably why it will scale, because it's so simple. And we needed to create a foundation of scale. And I think that sort of added up for us very well. It took us 2 years to reach there. And I think it did, we couldn't have done it if we didn't find Soshan as a partner. So I think I did remember from the early days, I think Nandan also told me that, if you don't find 1 or 2 people you can do this with, don't do this with, because it's very tough, what you're trying to do. And I think in that sense, having a partner who was very actively involved, walking the journey with us, it really helped.
That's a fascinating point you made, Mala, saying a 30,000-year problem had a ridiculously simple beginning. And I think that's a very interesting insight to land on. And while you were getting to this, the government was involved. I remember us having various kinds of conversation when one of the states got involved into this and made the matters even more interestingly complicated, because now you had a partner coming into play, a scale partner coming into play, while the infrastructure was not there. So what went on in your mind at that point in time? That was an interesting fork again.
So, I mean, it's very easy to say, that, make a promise that wo aa jayega, we will do this, don't worry, let's start with this. But I think it was very, very tough for us to navigate that situation, right? Because most of the people in the sector will say, show me what this is, right? Kahan pe kar rahe ho? Are you already doing it somewhere? And this is the whole, catch-22 situation. If I was already doing this in, 2 states, it would kind of scale on its own, right? I wouldn't need to speak about it, right? And the problem is not there. I mean, we're trying to sort of do this from scratch. And so, but was it very interesting? We were very upfront. We said, hey, this has not been tried anywhere else. But do you not see that this is going to be, in some sense, foundational? Because how are you going to build on anything? What the rest of it is not possible if you don't know this. So I think having a relationship helped Sanjay. And I think for Arghyam, what has always helped is our neutrality. We never really had an agenda to push. All of our partners and ecosystem relationships have been built on what is the problem on the ground and how do we solve that, whether it was subscale or scale or now population scale. And the integrity, the credibility of the organization, of the founders, of our own work, and all of that, I think, came into play. So they said, if you are saying something, then it probably there is some, there's merit in sort of going down that path. The problem itself spoke to a lot of people. And with the government, I think what we said is, let's start with a program. And the program per se was not population scale. It wasn't really looking at the entire state. So that also helped. So we had this opportunity to do an experiment at scale, but not really the entire state, right? And the program itself had some deliverables. So having that as a sort of, envelope also helped. Otherwise, you can go all over the place, right? So here we had some boundaries that helped a lot. And so starting off there, and then quickly, of course, building the product and delivering was, of course, very important, and that happened as well.
And on this journey, as you're going and you're gathering this ecosystem, there is a government actor coming to conversation. There is this Ocean helping you figure out what to build. And then Echo joins. I know Sunil is today on the call as well. So tell us something about how did that joining happen on the way?
I think it happened in parallel. I think we had been speaking to Echo even before we started to sort of hone in on the build, because somewhere we felt that this whole idea of move knowledge, not people, which is what Echo's sort of tagline is exactly what we were dealing with. Right, this whole idea of few experts having to go, literally you can count the number of hydrogeologists in the country, right? I mean, I would say it is not more than low double digits, right? I mean, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, that's what it is. And the country probably needs I don't know, 100 times that or something. So we said, this very similar problem we are trying to solve here. So it spoke to us, the remoteness, the kind of barefoot nature of the the beneficiaries or the trainees on the other side. All of that really spoke to us. So we felt there is something here, and this whole discipline, this peer-to-peer learning, the respect, the aspect of respect, and all teach, all learn. All of that really spoke to us. We felt that this is really amenable for what we are trying to do. And we had already said that we need to increase interactions. The one thing that we said we were very clear about is whatever we do, whether it's technology or anything else, it has to be first mile focused, which is really that person in the village who's managing the community water, barefoot hydrologist, hydrogeologist, Jal Surakshak, Bhujal Jankar, whatever, many names, but really the same thing. That person is our center, in terms of who we want to enable in the first instance. And so we felt that, how do we look at everything from that person's lens? And what we had learned was to make a good water security plan, it takes anything from 19 to 40 interactions with various sorts of people, not just one expert of some kind. And at scale, there were no operating models that were allowing for that. At max, they were able to get 2 to 3 interactions. So we felt, how do you amplify the interactions? This spoke to us, right? This spoke to us on you can increase interactions without commensurate increase in resources. You can also bring in different types of experts, which is also what is needed. And this whole idea of pivoting from supply side thinking to demand side thinking. What do the people want? You are training them on this, but the people may want that. How do you even figure that out? We felt that this whole idea of doing it the Echo way would be very useful for us. So that's how we started. And I'm trying to understand, we sat in on Echo sessions, trying to understand what is this method in the madness, so to speak. We tried to code some of that. And then we said, how do we apply, not one-on-one, because health and water are very, very different, but how do we take the salient principles of what Echo is saying and then bring it to water? And that's really what we are doing now, keeping the core intact, but really customizing it for water.
Fascinating. And then, so this is happening, and then you land on the public digital attestation as a very interesting capability you have built, not only for water, but as a abstractable capability that can be used in multiple different sectors. Of course, Socion has been a big brain child behind this. So how did you land to that question that if I am capacitated to handle water, my attestation and traceability can be platformed? That's what you did. That,
yes.
My capability can be actually now platformed and become a open resource
right.
for the ecosystem, right? So
that's right.
How did you land to that? Because our audience here struggles to land on
that. Yeah. Correct. I think So when you start with the whole idea of capacity building and look at where people are finding it a problem in terms of where their time and energy is going and they're not seeing results, is it all started with the idea of how do I get attendance, right? I think from a programmatic lens, it was a question of people are not, how do I sort of figure this out? Because that was very important for trainers and organizations to then prove back to funders, right? And so that became central to their problem, right? In terms of that we need to fix this. And I think one of the questions, I think Anand and Soshan asked us, why are you taking attendance? Why don't they give attendance? So
This
can
whole
we
emit versus
yeah,
extract conversation.
yeah. Can we incentivize that person to give attendance? And then the problem of attendance. So that's how it actually germinated there. If everybody is worried about attendance and that's the thing they want to solve, so sometimes you'll have to go with the problem that's stated, right? And you have to solve that. But really, by doing that, we pivoted from solving that problem to really saying, how do we enable and build agency? And through that process, a second order derivative could well be the attendance problem. And that became very exciting for us, because I don't know if we would have been very excited solving the attendance problem.
Absolutely. That the last thing you'd be excited is to solve the attendance problem.
Yeah.
Saying that you come to this moment of flight, right? After all this running, and now you can see the. So do share with us briefly about For Water. What does For Water stand for?
Yeah.
But you're standing at the edge of this. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, right? You're saying,
yeah.
So what's that feeling? That feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff?
That's extremely exciting, and it's very exhausting also. Because Sanjay, we kept saying this is not about technology, but we really did not realize that it is really 10% technology and 90% many other things. That I don't think we didn't expect that, right? Because, there's so many things that you need to negotiate with in terms of policy, regulation, programmatic frameworks, fund flexibility, what is funding available for and not available for, how are programs currently, sort of managing, and sort of you're entering that and sort of figuring out how this can help that and happen much, much better. Of course, all the stakeholders have their own, ways of doing things. So I think what we are seeing now, so as I said, we figured out that there are 4 problems worth solving in water, and it's probably agnostic. It could apply to any domain, but in water, it's certainly true. We said that you have the problem of convergence, because water has a very fractured mandate, right? Mandate is with water department, but funding largely comes from outside water, right? Today, it is largely NREGA, which is not water department. So convergence is a big issue. Liquidity,
we want
as
to expand NREGA.
Yes, how
for the audience.
It's NREGA is the Mahatma Gandhi, the employment guarantee program that the government runs, right? So that's a big source of income in rural India. So, and a lot of funding is endorsed for that programs, and water is a big part of what that money is used for. So there's a lot of intersect for water outcomes in that program. So convergence is a huge requirement, and we all know that negotiating with issues of convergence, it requires a lot of agency, right? It's not easy and simple. So that was one big problem we said we should try and solve. The second problem we said is one of liquidity, right? So as we said, experts are there, but not where we need them. Content is there, not where we need them. Best practices exist, but how do we access that, right? Data exists. Everybody will tell you there's a lot of data, but really, is it usable? Who can use it, right? So there's a lot of issues with liquidity we said we need to solve. The third problem is in water, a lot of claims are being made. And for all you know, those claims may be true, but we don't know. It's not verifiable, right? So at scale, we realize that if you want to scale, you need verifiability. So accountability is a big issue that we said we need to solve. And the fourth thing that we said is very few people are solving the problem of water that belongs to many people. So we need to lower the threshold of participation. So we called it CLAP and said, these are 4 big problems worth solving. So that was, again, within capacity building, 4 problems worth solving. That was a big moment for us. And within that, we said, what are some shifts we want to make? right? So, and that's where this whole attestation thing, this whole leaving behind thing came in, right? So the problem we said is many people are doing many things, but they don't leave a trace of that behind, right? There are no nutrients left behind for the next person to pick up from there. So you're not able to build on what has already happened. So that's the thing we said, that shift needs to happen. We need to leave behind, and we need to move from programmatic ways of doing things to community centric ways of doing things, supply side to demand side, right? So slowly start to build in elements of digital, how do we digitally light up people? How do we light up content? How do we then sort of give programs more observability so that they can know at scale what is going on? These are some things we felt were immediate requirements that would sort of shift the focus for everybody to see, okay, at scale, we need to shift the way and design things very differently. Right? That's where we are today. We're working with two large, sort of one large NGO and a large and a program within a state to actually see if saturation can happen, right? Which was a concept which is not at all there, right? There is nobody who is saturated. Even if you say I'm working in a district, it really means a few villages in that district, right? So, so what we are saying is, can we saturate this entire district? Which means that every person in every village who's a barefoot hydrogeologist is seen on a map, right? That person, you can see that person can see himself or herself. All the content that has been delivered and used in this training is visible on the map, right? And we know the topic that it was trained on, who trained that on that topic, and who was the trainee, and how many such sessions happened, right? What all does that trainee know or is already trained on? So all of this stuff is now digitally captured. So we can say in this last 1 year that around 5,000 people are lit up, right? So we have about 4,586 people to be exact, right, who are lit up. We have 200 odd trainers who are lit up, right? We have about, content pieces around, 1,800 sessions have happened in 11 programs, 1,000 pieces of content have been delivered. So really this kind of verifiable data was non-existent. So when we went back and showed this to the program owners, I think that was the turning point. They said, if this can happen with this +1 change in process, then this is something we want for all our programs or the entire state or whatever. So this whole idea of now we want this, because they are saying we data drives purpose. If you can see, then you can start to ask some next order questions, right? Why are we training all these people? What will they get in return? What is it that they are going to do now that they are trained, right? So all of those questions we were unable to ask at scale earlier because you did not have the data.
Fascinating. We have all been sort of talking about this whole sigmoid, which is that there is a phase where you build infrastructure. Things seem very slow. Things seems very calm, but there's a lot of heavy lifting going on. You are tying up things with partners. You are aligning with ECHO. You're building the PDA platform, setting up the government relationships. And then the uptick begins, right? The last I saw your data when you were doing that session for Catalyst 2030 on how do we actually look at nutrients leaving behind, and the numbers are now starting to multiply rather than add, right? So tell us what's happening on the ground, and what's happening to you at Arghyam.
Yeah. So I think as we were deploying this, I mean, and like I said, the water sector has a few differences that make it a little more difficult for us to do this kind of thing and embed it, because there is no cadre for water, right? The water does not have a cadre, right? So you're really talking about people who who are borrowed in some sense from various departments, or who have this added responsibility of doing this also. And so that creates a little bit of lack of stickiness, right? So I think so initially to say we need to make them visible for the exact same reasons that you don't have a cadre, you don't need to build a cadre, right? Because the moment you say that this is a person, perhaps an ASHA worker or an Anganwadi worker or a NREGA worker, but if you give this added thing to them, and they can also port this and say that they can work in water as well, right? So I think just doing that sort of advocacy, if you will, to the government, and saying that this is a way that you can actually leverage what is already there, right? People who are already there. And for all you know, in the villages, these are the same people who are also getting trained on water, but you're now making them visible, right? So that there's a lot of work that happens on that front. How will you sort of, what will happen if you light them, right? What exactly is the leverage of that you can get? So I think there's work there. There's work in terms of, what is this scanning in, scanning out thing, right? What do I have to do in the session, right? What if people don't have a smartphone? What if there is no connectivity? What are the solutions for that? Is it going to be excluding some people, right? And those are tough questions. Those were the toughest ones initially, right? And for the first 3 or 4 months, the difficult part was, obviously it takes time to saturate, right? And get 100% compliance, because there were those issues. There were smartphone issues. There were connectivity issues. Even today, we may not have 100%. We probably have 90 plus in some places, but not 100. So those issues are there. But really what happens is, when a process that is already working, see, we are not going into a vacant space. There is already something happening there, and we're getting in there and telling them to change the way they do things, right? So that part involved talking to the current programs and saying, you do your thing, but you also do this thing, till you reach a point where this thing can take over that thing, right? So I think that when you're parallel pathing, it is quite difficult. And I think the turning point was when we reached that whole, sort of critical mass, if you will, 70-80%. You're seeing this data coming in. People can start to imagine all the things they can do with the data. I think that is very liberating for the people in the programs, because it's not easy, because they're also struggling to kind of defend the numbers that they have to come up with in a way that is really, really tedious. Data generation is a big, big problem, right? So when you're saying some of these things, don't worry about, because you're going to get it as an exhaust. I think, and when we spoke about exhaust, they didn't really know what that is. We didn't know what that is, right? So, but when they saw this coming out, then they got excited, right? Okay, this is what you mean. All you have to do is scan in, scan out, and lots of stuff comes out, which is very useful. I think that became very, very powerful, because now they have a lot of confidence, right? People who are managing the program have a lot of confidence, and they are saying, okay, now scaling this, we are okay, because earlier we're not really sure what if we scale the wrong thing, or that we say something today and then it's found out as something else tomorrow. I think that's a big problem when you use public funds. You have to be responsible. So this whole idea of creating accountability and liberating that person and those people from this onerous job of defending data, I think that really has helped. And so now we're getting a lot of demand, right? Now people are saying 400 villages in 1 year. Can we do 6,500 in 1 year? So that's the order, right? 1,600 villages in 1 year. Can we do 30,000 in the next 2 years? So I think people are getting ambitious in their numbers. And it seems a bit unreal for us, because we really weren't expecting that in 1 year. But that's the demand, and people are saying, let's do this.
Amazing. So my last question is for Mala, the CEO. What transitions did you go through as the head of the organization?
Oh, it was, it happened. It's very difficult to sort of point out, phases, if I may say so. But for me, throughout my kind of work, it hasn't been one thing. And I think I kind of thrive in this learning something totally new. I think that's what keeps me going, right? So I think this is in that genre, right? I mean, I don't know if I would have continued if we hadn't done this, For me, I mean, it was just, I needed this, right? So as a person, I think it's very, very exciting. And I think ambiguity drives me, right? So because we are obsessing over finding that, what is that one thing we can hang on to? Right. So, I mean, when are these moments of the mission clarity was a great thing, saying that we won't build, but we will, and platform is not a thing. And that was a big thing as well. It's not like it's a box and you have to name it and it's something. No. it's many things and it's not a thing at all, right? That also is very liberating, right? How do we language that and make your peace with that, and visioning, what can happen, and just feeling excited that at the end of this, in 1 or 2 years, you can actually see something so different, right? And so useful as well, right? And I think the last thing that keeps me going, and I find that it's very easy in this sector because the questions are hard and the answers are hard. And we, if I may say so, we are not really impacted in the sense we have water, right? All of us have water. It's very easy to kind of change the question paper a bit so that you can figure out that, you have the easy answer, you kind of change the question a bit, right? That tendency, let's not get into that, right? It's hard, let's not change the question paper. So if for me personally, it was, if we can get out of this and not change the question paper and keep engaging with it, even if it is difficult, I think that's the excitement, because finding the right answer to a wrong question, not exciting.
Finding a right answer to the wrong question is not exciting. Wow, that's a great note to leave the discussion on. And the another amazing insight in your last 2 minutes was, Arghyam does not have a platform. Arghyam is a platform. And I think that is a very important mental shift. And I think Sunil and I have spoken about this in the past as well. Echo does not have a platform. Echo is a platform. And making that shift is the hard part, right? Because the moment you think you have a platform, you're looking at an object.
Yeah.
When you say you are a platform, then you are looking at many, many, many different things.
That's right.
Fascinating, right? Really grateful for you bringing home these points.